up to indicate if you wish to speak. I will then invite you at the appropriate time. Please note that the YouTube live stream sound recording is dependent on the correct use of the microphones. Therefore, can I ask when invited to speak, you turn on your microphone and turn it off when finished. Please reference a page or paragraph number when referring to the agenda papers and keep your contributions as clear and concise as possible. We do not have any fire alarm testing scheduled, so if you hear the alarm, please exit using either of the two marked fire escape routes. Once out of the building, please proceed to the designated muster point located on the grass verge by the police station entrance. Members, there is no members update this evening. Item 2 is apologies for absence. If I could have those, please, Ms. Hawkin.
Certainly, Chair. We've had apologies from Councillor Bell, Bound, Oral Cook, Burwood, Lay, Laybourne.
No. Councillor Lay is in fact here, sorry.
Oh, okay. I'll update that, that's fine, so I'll do that one. Then I've got Siddle Norman, Stevens, Swindle, White and Whiffin.
Right.
Thank you.
Anybody we've missed, Councillor Morgan?
Yeah, Councillors Durham and Morley.
And Councillors Durham and Morley, please. Councillor Spenceley?
I understand that Councillor Dodsley was advised it would be best not to attend.
Right. So could you add Councillor Dodsley too, please, as she was advised
Certainly can.
not to
No
attend.
problem, thank you.
Thank you very much. Moving on. Item 3 is the minutes. It's recommended that the minutes of the meeting held on 16th of December, found in the agenda supplement, are approved as a true and accurate record. I'm going to take them as read, and I so propose. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Morgan, I spotted first. Members, are there any matters of accuracy? Can we agree those by assent? Agree. Thank you very much. Item 4 is declarations of interest. To disclose the existence and nature of any disclosable pecuniary interests, other registrable interests and non-registrable interests relating to items of business on the agenda having regard to paragraph 9 and appendix B of the Code of Conduct for members, and members are reminded they're also required to disclose any such interests as soon as they become aware should the need arise throughout the meeting. Members, anything? No. Then we move on to our planning application. Item 5, land west of the cemetery, London Road, Maldon. We do have a very brief presentation. There's no members update for this, as I've said. But members, we're here to agree the reasons for refusal and determine this application. Therefore, there's no further debate and reasons cannot be added that weren't discussed at the last meeting. Members are reminded that they also cannot speak or vote on this item if they weren't present at the last meeting. So, members. No, so Mr. Johnson, sorry, I apologise. I'm trying to cut poor Mr. Johnson out.
Thank you, Chair. As members are aware, we're here to consider the land west of the cemetery, London Road, Maldon. The proposal you're fully aware of, as this was debated on the 16th of December. But I'll just run through it again. Outline application with all matters reserved except for access for the erection of up to 275 residential units, including affordable housing, land for a children's nursery, 1.8 hectares of land for an extension to Maldon Cemetery, drainage work, landscaping, access to the A414, pedestrian cycle access to Spittal Road and London Road, and associated infrastructure works. The application was considered on the 16th of December, where members were minded to refuse the application contrary to officer's recommendation. And from the debate of that meeting, a number of reasons for refusal were put forward. These have been collated into the usual reasons for refusal format, and this is set out in the report in front of you, as long as some introductory comments leading into it. But at 2, we've got the discussion of the suggested reasons for refusal and relevant policies. So we can 2.2, the above impacts are taken individually or in combination. Again, that just goes into a little bit more explanation there. And that's providing the blurb, which is informing the various reasons for refusal. 2.6, you've got the relevant policies. So members should just bear that in mind because they inform the reasons for refusal. And at 2.7, that's where we go into the reasons for refusal specifically. Unless members feel it's necessary, I won't read out all of the reasons for refusal. So I will take those as read. There are two, the first two reasons for refusal go to the heart of the debate and the relevant policies, and they are collated around two principal issues, which is the highway impacts and what sort of results from that, but also the impact on the character and appearance of the area. So those are collated within those two reasons for refusal. The additional reasons for refusal from 2.8 relate to Section 106 matters. As there is a minded to refuse position in front of us, and there is no signed or agreed Section 106 attached to this case, because you can have an agreed Section 106. It is very rare with applications before a decision. There is none in this case. So these also form part of the reasons, and those set out under the bullet points of 2.8. Which again, I'm taking that members are fully aware of that. So that's all that needs to be said on the presentation. We just have the map just to remind us all where the site is, and I will leave that there, and it will be for the committee to have any comments on the reasons for refusal, if they so wish. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. There's no public speaking allowed in this kind of meeting. So now, members, Councillor Morgan.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I think we've now established that this is, I think, the first constitutional break meeting held for on a district planning matter. And I just wonder, it might be helpful if, unless, of course, members are minded to go back on their original decision, unless they are, is that perhaps it might be quick or sort of allow the buttons to move on swiftly if we can identify the member who is actually going to necessarily lead on the appeal, and that they then sit down and define the actual suggested reasons for refusal with the relevant officers.
So, Jacob?
Merely a suggestion.
So if I go back, and I'll try not to be too long, last time we debated a series of, or members debated reasons of refusal, and I triggered a constitutional break to give us time to try to seek clarity and reflect on the minutes, to bring up the reasons for refusal. Those are the reasons in front of us. Members of this district plan committee while agreeing they were minded to refuse, didn't take the vote because they didn't have the reasons for refusal in front of them. So the way it would work is, if members are still minded to refuse, which I assume they are, they look at and consider the reasons for refusal in front of them, check that the reasons for refusal as drafted by officers reflect the reasons which members wanted to raise for the reasons for refusal. If there's an agreement to those reasons, the wording of those reasons for refusal, then it can be moved to have a vote on these as reasons for refusal, i.e. to refuse the application based on these reasons for refusal. I think it's one of those ones. We had a different situation last week where there were reasons which we could understand and draft. Today is the sort of come back with properly worded reasons for refusal, which if members feel need to be tweaked, we hopefully should be able to agree a tweaking today if there is consensus to that.
Thank you. Members, anyone else?
So
Mr. Jagger.
I think Councillor Driver may answer the question I was going to say.
I don't know what question you full transfer.
The point I was going to say is, if I remember correctly, Councillor Driver volunteered to lead on appeal if it went to an appeal.
Yes, I believe he was nominated.
That's captured in the minutes as well.
Yes. Sorry, Councillor Spenceley, then Councillor Lagan. Paula Spenceley, that is.
Yes, sorry, I was just going to clarify that my memory is that it was both Councillor Fittock and Councillor Driver.
That wasn't what I was, sorry. I was going to ask a different, or make a different statement, which is that this seems to present the arguments or the reasons that we raised and discussed at the last meeting, and therefore actually, I'm happy from my point of view that this represents the concerns that were raised. I presume when it comes to the actual appeal, there'll be some work to make sure there is an evidence base behind it and the arguments are very clearly presented, but in broad terms, these were the concerns that were raised.
Thank you. Councillor Lagan.
Yeah, it's basically what Councillor Drivers just said. We debated for nearly 3 hours last time, identified that we were minded to refuse. You went away to draw those up in clinical terms from a planning perspective, so they're policy compliant, so their robustness to refuse. And then we agreed that Councillor Fittock and if Councillor Driver if it goes to appeal, to represent us. And all we had to do is come back and agree to wording tonight. That was my understanding. Right.
Councillor Fluker.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I think on page 7, paragraph 1.1, I think there's a couple of typos there. I think everybody should be mindful of the fact that these reports are actually gone over forensically by PINs, and I've known them to pick up on this sort of thing. So, Chairman, just moving on to something else, and I just draw your attention, members, to 2.7. And this is the issue of outside the settlement boundary. Now, I'm sure officers will be mindful, of course, that this is taken in the whole context, but with all of the appeals of recent, I think it's section 8, correct me if I'm wrong, policy S8 rather, it's always discounted by virtue of the fact we don't have a 5-year housing land supply. Now, for those of you that haven't been through this process, obviously, I think we have to accept that there will likely be an appeal and it will be a hearing, but we've got to be absolutely sure that although we're going to have we'll have our statement, a common ground, I think that we should be mindful that we don't put too much before the KC and our planning inspector and the planning inspector unless we are sure that we can defend it, which brings me on to traffic. Now, at the moment, when you go to appeal, you will have a hostile witness in the form of a statutory consultee, which is quite unusual, and that will be the Highways Authority. So basically, we are going to have to evidence everything that we feel is incorrect in relation to the Highways response. And of course, the Highways response is supported by what will be the appellant's own highways expert. So, Mr. Jagged, I just wondered how, at this stage, how would you counter that?
Thank you.
I think if I'm reflecting back on the District Planning Committee before Christmas, there was quite a good debate between members and officers of Essex County Council as a highway authority, and there clearly was a difference of opinion on the highway impacts. Without saying exactly how and why, following that meeting with the idea that there may be an appeal, I want to be on the front foot, and I have already spoken to a planning consultancy who would come in and seek to support the council and support the members should it go to appeal, to make sure we had capacity, because there may be a few appeals coming up in the near future. and they would work closely with members who will be leading on this to support them. I think as part of that discussion, if there is a further need for expert advice through that planning consultancy, that could form part of that conversation.
Well, I think that certainly puts everybody in their comfort zone, so long as they come up with a contrary view, and we're going to have to be mindful of that, because otherwise we're not tootling off to appeal. And I think, Ms. Jacob, I think when we dealt with the matter at Queenborough Road, Southminster, and I brought this point up, and you said then that we, under the circumstances with that application at that meeting, you said we would appoint our own independent, or we would instruct a highways consultant. So I hope that still stands, but thanks for the clarity.
Thank you. Councillor Fitton.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, I understand what Adrian's saying, but generally speaking, inspectors will regard the policies as the policy. So SA is either complies with SA or it doesn't. The question of the weight that the inspector gives to that policy becomes a different matter. So it's not inappropriate to say that it's departure from SA. As the Latchin appeal, the appellant actually agreed that it was a departure from SA, but the weight the inspector gives to it will be based upon our 5-year house lands pipe. I mean, there's a point in it I'd like to raise, and in 2.3, I mean to be very much the problem that we're facing is this drip of development, creating a situation of piecemeal development across the district that I think is the major consideration in many of these. And what I did is I just referred back to Essex County Council's review on the local development plan review to get an understanding of how you perceive the situation if we were to embark upon a plan. Because bear in mind, we're not embarking upon a plan, but in essence, we've had a new plan imposed upon us because of the housing targets. But it's just going to happen by speculative development. And in their document, and it's repeated a number of times, it says new secondary school. The scale of growth requires additional secondary school as there is no scope to further expand the Bloom Academy at Maldon beyond the existing expansion plans. There are also concerns with regard to the scope to further expand Ormiston Academy, Burnham on Couch and William Fellows, Southwood and Fellows beyond the identified in the school organisation plan, which basically is showing that those schools are pretty much at capacity. And then we move on to the options that we were considering. And we have to take this in the context of where we are, that we're not in control of what's going on. When we looked at option 3, generally focused on Chelms, Maldon, Haybridge, Burnham, Crouch and large villages of the settlement hierarchy, ECC advised that the option to proportion growth between settlements is not considered appropriate and is unlikely to secure delivery of the viable, sustainable infrastructure at scale necessary for the level of growth. It says the same in option 4. Now, the problem that we got here as members is that we know from the consultees' responses that they've got grave concerns. They've got grave concerns about the infrastructure. And I think that the fundamental problem that we have as members is trying to decide whether the planning benefit outweighs the harm, given there is no infrastructure delivery plan for any infrastructure, whether it be education, health or highways. And given that the fact that they've, in both responses, I mean, bear in mind, we've already gone above a plan requirement, because when you look at the spectral growth for Maldon, which was determined to be at its capacity, already we've consented to 132 houses on site S2A that have become windfall, and also 281 at Haybridge Garden Suburbs that all say that there isn't sufficient capacity at Plume, so therefore we need additional school capacity, but we haven't got any, have we? We have got no plan to deliver any.
Councillor, we're now rather moving into the debate again.
Okay.
So can we,
I'm just
can we stick
I'm
with
just
the
trying
reasons
to
for
qualify my
refusal?
reason. I think that element of it, the infrastructure, should be part of the reason for refusal, because I think that's fundamental to it's not just about the highways, is it? It's the general infrastructure position.
Right, thank you. Mr. Jarrod?
So I'm trying to cross-read between a couple of things at the moment. At the moment, section 2.7, which is the meat of the reasons for refusal, focused particularly on the highway impacts, which were debated and we've touched on already. I guess the question, and I'm just trying to reread it and check, is whether the suggestion from members is, are they asking for a further reason about the cumulative impact on infrastructure? And I'm looking down my table as whether or not, if that was the case, we've got a parallel reason for refusal we can quickly advise on from a previous case. So maybe the question is, will I allow Mr. Johnson to double check if in the best Blue Peter way, if he's got one he's prepared earlier, is that our members asking for a further reason for refusal based on impact on infrastructure in the area, and whether or not that can be provided in a timely way. I think the challenge, if I just give a little bit of further background to that, is obviously the service providers haven't raised it, as Councillor Fuka said, subject to financial payments. That's covered in the section under 2.8. But I think from what Councillor Fiddick is saying is, or questioning and seeking other members whether they endorse it or not, whether there should be a reason for refusal, that they don't think the impacts can be adequately mitigated through the contributions from the scale of this development on its own, because the infrastructure required is more, you need a holistic look, and a piecemeal approach to mitigating the infrastructure means it won't be delivered in a timely way, is how I'm sort of interpreting it. But I guess the question to members, I'm trying to buy Mr. Johnson a little bit of time. Is that a reason for refusal members would like to have? And in which case, I will then look at Mr. Johnson, whether he's got a condition, a reason for refusal he could suggest.
Thank you, Chair. I haven't actually found a reason for refusal yet, but what I will just say at that very point in terms of the position of, or the status of contributions in an application, and what is it meant to do is something that was touched on at our Southeast Area Committee yesterday, and those members there will recall that very point we considered, and I stated that, and this is what's set out within the guidance, that the section 106 must be fair and reasonably related to the development that's in front. Contributions cannot go beyond the impact that the development would cause or have as a result if it were to be approved and carried out. No more than that. There may be an extant situation where the infrastructure isn't acceptable as it is, but that's, in a way, that's not the fault of the development proposed, because the development proposed is meant to mitigate its own impact. Now, if there is an additional reason for refusal around the infrastructure, then that's invariably also saying that the contributions proposed are unacceptable. So that would leave us in a difficult position, in my view.
Just quickly, I mean, it might well be that this is considered as part of policy S2, because policy S2 indicates that there should be nothing that would prejudice delivery of the garden suburbs. Now, the question is that if you have developments ongoing at the moment, and you have competing developments coming up against it, and there isn't sufficient school places to accommodate both, the development doesn't just stop when the last house is built. There should be growth for people that, as their children move through primary to secondary school into that location. So, I mean, I understand what Mr. Johnson's saying, but the problem is that this isn't a plan-led system, this is speculative growth. So, whilst they've got to mitigate the only impact of the development, if it's not deliverable, then it's really, what happens?
Mr. Javard?
I'm trying to be join up the two approaches. I think the argument which, if members wanted to pursue an infrastructure issue is, and I'm trying to remember exactly the quote. So if you can require Section 106 contributions to make an unacceptable development acceptable in planning terms. Then the requirement, as Mr. Johnson said, is the contributions must be fairly and reasonably related in scale to the development being proposed. The argument which would have to be put forward is the development cannot be made acceptable in planning terms by the contribution, because the contribution is, words effective, so piecemeal that the infrastructure which is required to mitigate the impact won't be delivered till, whether it was the Education Authority or whoever, has collected so many of these, they've got the opportunity to build a new primary or secondary school, and that could be a long time in the future. So therefore, if one ties it back to, you're not promoting sustainable development because it can't be mitigated adequately in the short to medium term. I can see where members are coming from that, in that direction. But again, a bit like the conversation we had on transport, we don't have those comments from any of the infrastructure providers saying you can't approve it. So we would equally have to be trying to seek expert advice from, I'm not sure who, on education, on health and all these other areas which say it can't be provided. And well, I understand exactly where members are coming from. We're definitely on the back foot with the statutory local education authority and the statutory local highway authority saying it's fine subject to a contribution. So there's a big risk and caveat I'm putting there, but I equally hopefully I've set out the thought process which would have to be taken to justify a reason for refusal on that basis. But we don't, as we stand, I don't have the evidence in front of me to justify that position. But as local ward members, you probably know the type of capacity at the schools and other facilities better than I do.
Thanks. I've got Councillor Driver, then Councillor Stamp.
Yeah, a couple of things from me. Just in relation to that last point, it seems to me that this is quite fundamental, not just to this application, but to other applications as well. That actually, one of the issues for us is that actually we are hitting a barrier in terms of infrastructure and just trying to throw money at something where we're not able to use that money to mitigate the development doesn't help us at all. It doesn't help this particular development, and it doesn't help subsequent developments. So it seems to me that actually it is something that we should challenge. I mean, at the end of the day, if we lose it, we lose it. But actually, it seems to me so fundamental to actually issues that we've got within the area and the lack of infrastructure that it feels to me like this is something we should challenge. The other element I was going to talk about was the transport issue, traffic issue. It seems to me, I mean, the argument that was being presented by Highways is all we need to do is to look at it completely in isolation, and we need to consider no other development at all. We just need to consider 275 houses sitting next to the 414. Nothing else is their argument. But that's not the reality. And it seems to me that actually one of the things that the Planning Policy Working Group has been talking about, and we talked about last week, was the need for evidence. We've been talking about this all along. And one of the things that we were expecting is that actually we would have a transport assessment, and the 414 was one of those roads that was going to be looked at in terms of a strategic view, taking into account all the other developments and whether it could cope with additional developments. So in one sense, depending on the timing of this, if this is something we are going to do and are planning to do, to have a traffic assessment, which is what we had planned to do, it seems to me that that would provide or help to provide. And I mean, you don't know what the outcome of that will be, and you don't know. But actually, that may well provide the evidence base that we need. Particularly if we initiate it, because I have to say I am very sceptical about developers who go to a company and say, can you do a traffic assessment? And they will produce a traffic assessment to meet the needs of the developer. I know they have the rules they have to apply, but the steer that they will give that assessment will be clearly in favour of the person paying for the assessment, he says. But I know they have the rules they have to follow, and I'm sure that's the case. But I think that we may well find that we could add to the evidence base by going down the road of our own assessment, which we have been planning to do anyway.
Thank you. Mr. Jaggard.
Just on that one, I'm trying to... part of the work that the conversations with the Highway Authority is about trying to build a new transport model. That isn't a quick piece of work. They've been working on it for a while, but there is a big difference between a transport model and a transport assessment.
But sorry, can I just come back? Their argument was all they need to look at is one development. So actually, if you have the sort of assessment that's done for a local plan has to take into account a more strategic view of traffic, not a corridor view, not simply an isolated community, as is this, an isolated development.
I'm afraid there is a difference between determining a planning application and writing a whole local plan. The development is the one which is in front of us to be determined. But I think there's potentially, I don't think there's on one hand a difference between us, because there is a reason for refusal on transport. And if I bring us back to the decision members need to take today on the transport reason for refusal, does it cover everything members want it to cover? Do they think it falls short in some way? And if so, what do members think it should include? But it's trying to be worded carefully to cover what's there and is appropriate for determining a planning application rather than a test of soundness for a local plan.
Thank you. Councillor Stamp.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Can we not somehow tie it into the Essex County Council's response to Regulation 18 that came in 2022? They said quite clearly, didn't they, based on what Councillor Fluke has said about that the plume can't take any more expansion. And I think one of the things they've said, I've just found it and I've just lost it again, sorry, so I can't even tell you what page it was on. It said that if to provide a new secondary school wherever in the district, you needed 5,000 more houses. So could something like that not be tied in? Would you stop talking about Oldthorne and just leave it alone? And it needs to be tied into that, because that was what they responded to in 2022. Now, we all know Essex County Council, I'm just going to change my specs because I can't see you up there, responded, they're not allowed to refuse you, they have to mitigate. They can't turn around and say you cannot have that planning application because of the lack of school places. By law, they have to provide an education. We all know that. I say that every meeting. Now, the only way you can try and see if you can get them to make a statement if it goes to appeal, or try and get them to come on the stand. And I don't see why you can't seem to get Essex County Council to actually send somebody to actually try and support it. Because at the moment, I don't know, it'd be good if Councillor Durham was here, because he knows more, I've been a cabinet member, about the future plans, but I've not been party to say they're going to build a new school anywhere or they're going to expand. They have to provide the places, but if there's no room to expand, which is what Councillor Fittock's just said, how can they? So to me, that would be an argument I would make, whether respect to listens or not is irrelevant. But as again, little Johnny and Jenny's parents, if they can't get their kid in a school place, they're going to be put on a bus and they're going to be taken out of the district. And if you read the Regulation 18, they don't want the kids out of the district because at the moment, as far as I've just read on here, there's no cross-border cooperation. Even though there most probably will be, there isn't as it stands at the moment. I don't know if that helps or that's, I'm talking rubbish, but I would certainly go that way if it was me.
I think you probably partly answered your own question. That if
I suggested what to do.
But if the education authority is not able to object because it has to, by its definition, has to provide education for children, and by law it is acceptable to put people on school transport and move them long distances.
It's not by law.
Okay.
And that doesn't, sorry to interrupt you, but that doesn't accord with their own policies. They maybe can send somebody across the river, we've had this before, but they won't because you haven't got a boat. But the thing is, no, it's serious, we've had it. We've had it.
Members, sorry, not across
We've had
the
it.
floor, please.
But I know what you're saying, Mr. Jaggard. But the thing is, these and our members are more than capable to say the reality. What I was suggesting is to try and get Essex County Council to come forward and make a speech, or at least put a statement if it goes to appeal. They might not, but I would press it.
So I know 5 minutes ago, Michael Johnson wanted to come back on the potential reason for refusal. So before I comment further, because he may have some words of wisdom or some words of caution.
Yeah, I haven't found this other appeal decision, but I did have a point.
Mike.
Oh, microphone, please. Sorry. Who's Mike?
Yeah, that threw me actually. the mic. Yes, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I've been looking through appeal decision. I haven't committee reports that we've considered recently in terms of those reasons for refusal. I haven't found one that links to it at the moment. The ones we've considered recently does not consider this particular issue that we're talking about here, based largely around infrastructure. But I did want to come back to a point again about the infrastructure argument. And I do appreciate if that's a position that members want to push forward, then members are at liberty to do that, yeah? And whatever resources it's felt necessary to assist within that. And that has been discussed here, you know, Councillor Drivers mentioned it, yourselves mentioned it, and so on. And that's fine. But it would still be a difficult position because what the inspectorate will be dealing with is the application that's in front of them. And I'm just raising that again as a word of caution because that's what's going to be on the table. If there is the inability for the local planning authority to kind of sort itself out in terms of the infrastructure requirements, and that's the responsibility of the local authority. That's not the responsibility of making a determination on a particular planning application, which, in the words of the National Planning Policy Framework, can facilitate through its contributions mitigation for the various elements, and particularly where they are supported through our statutory advisors. That's just a very difficult position to be in. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor.
Before I move on, can I just come back on that, the final time on education? Councillor Nick Spenceley and I attended a planning appeal. It was the Haybridge one. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm sure the inspector turned around and said about the education, and they were very honest. They turned around and said they cannot consider it because nobody from Essex County Council or no statement was given at the time to contest what the barristers on this side were arguing about. Hence why I said if you can get them to come to the appeal or put a statement, it could add weight. Did they say that? Thank you. That's why I'm saying what I said.
Mr. Johnson.
Thank you, Chair. Just on that particular point, part of the reason for that, and it was the same also for the highways, is that there was no justification provided. But that was the reality. That's the reason why it was sort of thrown out or not considered by the inspectorate. They were not able to, for example, present a cogent seal compliance statement in terms of, you know, what are these contributions for and where are they going? That's been a big issue. There's been an effort to redress that, and I've been involved in a couple of appeals recently. There was, I think there was the one you came to yourself, Councillor Fluker, fairly recently, where we were at pains with education to try and get a seal compliance statement showing exactly what these contributions are for and where they're going, because without that the inspector would not consider it. But in those previous appeals, you know, we're talking about the 281 scheme at Haybridge and so on, there was no justification in that particular sense. That's why they weren't considered. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Paula Spenceley, then Councillor Nick Spenceley, then Councillor Fluker.
Okay, so with regard to education, part of the problem, I fear, is that the Education Authority was misled on the speed of the build-out of Site 2D. And so therefore their prediction and their 10-year plan, I think it is, for education did not consider that the need would come forward as fast as it has. And in fact, that is in part, if you want, evidenced by the fact that the plan for the primary school on the North Haybridge Garden suburb will now be years after the building work is finished, because we were predicting that that site would be built out at 50 houses a year, and that was the data that the plan that Essex as an education authority had was based upon. Now, because I have spoken extensively with those developers from time to time, their impression is that Essex is confused by us, that basically we haven't provided an accurate, and yes, again, just recently, and it's great that we have, but there has been a change to our land supply calculation. Now, previously, of course, there was a huge change, and let's not argue about why that happened, but there was nevertheless a huge change in a very short amount of time. And part of that, or a large part of that, was due to the, I'm sorry to say, poor forecasting of the build out of Site 2D. So I'm not sure that the Education Authority has been armed with the information that it needs to make an accurate assessment. And so I wonder if it is worth going back to the Education Authority to try to clear up that mess, at least with regard to this potential appeal, and thinking again what we include within our reasons for refusal. Thank you.
I think just a quick response, and without unpicking all of those bits, what I took from the room earlier is members were keen to actually determine the application tonight, and I think any discussion with Essex on education could be quite a long drawn out process, and therefore the determination of this application would be deferred. And I still fear, from an Essex education point of view, I pick up Councillor Stamp's point of view, is they probably would still have to provide a response which said, subject to a contribution, we were happy, if they're not allowed to object to a planning application. So I totally hear the conversation, but I guess I'm also trying to guide in terms of which are the fights which may be worth having and which ones. I'll put it a different way. I'm not sure delaying to continue a conversation with Essex County Council would pay much. But in the general, I'm happy that officers continue a dialogue with Essex, and particularly once Council has approved the new 5-year housing land supply calculations. But tonight, I think we're trying to get a decision on what the reasons for refusal would be, and then have a vote on that, whether that is what members want, the final vote on to determine the application.
Thank you. Councillor Nick Spencer.
Thank you, Chair. This whole planning, application and appeal process feels like a board game where half of the board is deemed to be out of play. And I found it very frustrating at the Persimmon appeal that already referred to. And one of the problems there was actually we were very fresh to the failure of the 5-year housing land supply, and the council, without alerting members, I have to say, actually signed what I would call instruments of surrender. It was basically a statement in which we gave up everything. But anyway, returning to this, Councillor Fluker warned us to stick to substantive issues. And that's probably quite important. And the points in 2.7 are perhaps our heavy caliber weapons, if you like. And I can understand that we shouldn't dilute them. But I do feel it should be part of the debate at appeal and in the written record that follows, even if it's not put forward as one of our substantive points. Is there a way of expressing the general concern, which I think everyone has expressed, that this cumulative infrastructure issue is a major problem? And Mr. Jaggott himself very eloquently summarised it at an application we discussed just the other week. I do feel it should be part of the debate at appeal, and it may be that we're saying, okay, it's not one of our main weapons, but it should be there, part of the record.
I'm happy to hear various conversations from the committee, and then try to see if we can summarise a position.
Okay, Councillor Fluker.
Chairman, I'll give way to Councillor Neil, and then I'll come back afterwards.
Right, I've actually got Councillor Fittock next, and then Councillor Neil. Sorry, could you use the microphone, please?
My point will probably sort that out and hopefully resolve members. It might help.
Please.
Just refer to item 2.3. Any planning inspector will have copies of this document. Whilst I see a specific planning condition is beneficial, it seems like we're being advised not to put it through as one because it may detrimentally impact a potential appeal. But 2.3 states that we have concerns with regards to significant infrastructure constraints within Maldon. To me, that covers the schools issues and other issues that we have in Maldon that is going to constrain our growth. So I think personally that statement is as good as having a condition. But the planning inspector will have copies of this as part of the process, and we would be able to use it in the same way that Councillor Spencer has said. It's still part of our argument.
Thank you. Councillor Fittock.
Thank you, Chair. I was just going to say, I mean, on the point that Councillor Spencer raised about do Essex have an up-to-date position, the answer is no. I've got the trajectories I expect from the next 5 years, and it's about 500 out because they think that S2D is going to complete in 2035. But aside that, I'm just wondering, I mean, I understand the concern about the wording, and it's very important in the views. I mean, is this an area that we could cover under the actual policies that we've got in terms of presenting evidence, i.e. policy S2, whereby really basically what it's saying is that the growth should be properly managed and infrastructure delivery should be identified as being of where it's going to be before it happens. So I'm wondering whether, if you're uncomfortable about having wording in the refusal, whether that becomes part of the argument under the policies.
Mr. Johnson.
Thank you, Chair. I do believe with what's been said just now, Councillor Neil actually summed it up by extracting from 2.3. I think that can be used as an additional reason for refusal. What this report doesn't say that if you disagree no, this report doesn't say you have to agree with these reasons for refusal. Yeah, it says these are suggested reasons for refusal. That gives members scope to attach additional within the context. And I think the point by Councillor Neil there, I think sums it up under 2.3. We're talking about the cumulative infrastructure implications. That can form the basis for a sort of similar worded kind of reason to the rest, that again, because of the impact on the cumulative, that sort of thing. We can work with that. And I think an additional reason for refusal will capture what's been said in the meeting here. It won't need another meeting. It's the sort of wording that we can agree with the chair, the ward member, well, particularly Councillor Driver and Fittock, who will be taking this forward on appeal, because there will be an appeal on this. And we can get a reason for refusal out that's agreed and captures the essence of what members are trying to achieve here. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Jaggard, you happy with that?
Yes, I'm happy, and I think linking it, there's probably a couple of policies to link to it, but also the SEAL 122 test, which I think there is which picks up the paragraph 2.3, which is because the contributions have to be fairly and reasonably related in scale to the development, it isn't able to mitigate the impact properly in a timely way. So there is something around that. So there's the 3 substantive reasons for refusal, which would be set out with this one with tweaks, and that can be agreed slightly offline, but I think we've got the essence of it. I'm just trying to double check the reasons for refusal under 2.8 in case I'm trying to see. Yes, I'm trying to see whether education contribution is there, because so if the new reason for refusal is that the education contribution isn't appropriate, then you probably don't need the one under 2.8 which says subject to, because there hasn't been an education, or it might be tweaked on the basis that Chair, the 3 substantive reasons and making sure there's no duplication or conflict between the 3 substantive reasons under 2.7 and 2.8. I think those could be the reasons for refusals members may want to vote on. And I think what the resolution would be is members resolve to refuse planning permission for the reasons set out in the report with additional reason for refusal, but it's delegated to me to refuse from the committee in consultation with the chair, the vice chair, and I think it was suggested the 2 members who would be representing the council at the appeal. If I've captured that correctly, does that give you something to move on? Sorry, Councillor Fluker.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I mean, I'm actually drifting towards that, so it might actually help you wind things up. I just wanted to say, with an eye to costs on both sides. I mean, at the moment, we're talking about, I think, perhaps employing 3 consultants. I don't know what the appeals budget looks like at the moment. But I think members should be mindful of the costs that are likely to be involved in this. And of course, the appellant could claim for costs, but they would have to demonstrate unreasonable behaviour on behalf of the local planning authority. But in this instance, bearing in mind it's an overturn, the local planning officer, authority brackets read members close brackets. I mean, we shouldn't shy away from these things, but we need to be absolutely sure. And I think, bearing in mind, all of these conversations will be poured over by PINs and everybody else. I think we need to be mindful of some of the advice that officers have given, which has been contrary to the view of members, and where that could take us. But I think we probably need to have a word with Mr. J as well before we go steaming off in a different direction. But Chairman, I think I'm disappointed that Mr. Jaggard is actually the Director of Planning and not the other member from somewhere else, because I think he beautifully framed his own resolution. But Chairman, based on that, I would propose that, Chairman, we, contrary to the officer's recommendation, that we do approve this application in relation to the conditions.
Did you just
in,
say
Approve or reject?
You just said approve.
Reject it. Sorry, I'm around the wrong way. We've contrary to the officer's recommendation. Yeah, I'm sure the planning inspector is going to be delighted when she meets me. But yeah, contrary to the officer's recommendation, that we actually refuse this application on the basis of paragraphs 2.7, 2.8, and the narrative in 2.3, subject to Ms Jaggard and the two members that have put themselves forward and the chairman agreeing the wording. Yeah, I think
Okay,
that,
so is that seconded?
thank God.
Councillor
Ron.
Pratt?
Can we just do show? Just take a vote.
Take a vote. I think has the other one been thrown out, Chair?
That's off the, well, it was never on then. It was never seconded. So members, can we go to the vote? Those in favour of Councillor Fluker's proposal? Get right, quick count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. Right, 15. Anyone against? No one against. Abstentions? Me. So thank you very much, members. That is refused in line with the discussion and the report. You'll be delighted to hear there is no urgent business, so I close the meeting with thanks to officers and members of the public at 8:25. Thank you.